which means we have to look inside. If your happiness depends on things outside being a certain way, there are other people who have their ideas of how things should be outside, and you're going to come into conflict. But when you search for happiness by looking within, developing the qualities you have within, then there's no need for conflict. In fact, the more you can find true happiness inside, the more you'll have to offer to others. So tell yourself, may I find true happiness? May I understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. And then extend the same thought to others. Start with people who are close to your heart, your family, your very close friends. May they find true happiness too. And then spread those thoughts out in ever-widening circles to people you know well and like. To people you like even though you don't know them so well. To people you're more neutral about. And to people you don't like. Remember, when you're wishing goodwill for others, extending goodwill to others, you're hoping that they will understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. And that's a thought you can have for anyone. If you have trouble thinking of some goodwill for some certain people, ask yourself, what would you gain by their suffering? Nothing. And it's very rarely the case that people suffer and reflect on themselves and realize how their suffering comes from within. Often when they suffer, they start blaming other people outside. So the world would be a better place if everyone could understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. So be generous with your goodwill. Extend it to people you don't even know. And not just people, living beings of all kinds, east, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. Now bring your attention to the breath. Take a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths, and notice where you feel the breathing process in the body. Because when we speak of the breath, it's not just the air coming in and out through the nose, but it's primarily the energy in the body that moves through the body and allows the air to come in and out. And you can look, you can notice that anywhere, wherever it's most obvious, wherever it's clearest. Focus there. And then ask yourself, does long breathing feel good? If it does, keep it up. If it doesn't, you can change. Make it shorter, more shallow, faster, slower, heavier, lighter. Experiment for a while to see what rhythm and texture of breathing feels best for the body right now. If your thoughts wander away from the breath, you don't have to follow them. If they come wandering in, they can go wandering out. If you do catch yourself following them, just drop them. You don't have to complete them. You don't have to peer into them to see what they have to offer. Just let them go. And you'll be back right with the breath. No matter how many times this happens, just keep coming back, coming back. Each time you come back, reward yourself with a breath that feels especially good. And then, of course, why limit yourself to just one breath? Keep on breathing in ways that feel really good inside. The more sensitive you are to the needs of the body in terms of the breathing, the happier the mind will be to stay. As the breath gets comfortable, there is a tendency to focus on the comfort rather than the breath, in which case you're going to lose the foundation for your concentration. So the next step is to be aware of the whole body as you breathe in, the whole body as you breathe out. For the past two talks, we've talked about starting a survey of the body first, going from the navel up through the front of the chest and then down the back. This time I'd like to try a variation. Ask yourself right now, where are the tips of your fingers, the tips of your thumbs? Visualize the bones inside there. And then ask yourself, is there any tension around those bones? If there is, think of it dissolving as you breathe in, as you breathe out. Then think of the bones in the joints, the second joints of each finger, each thumb. Where are they right now? You visualize them, then you locate where the feeling is in the body, where those parts of the body are. And then again, if you notice any tension in those parts of the body, allow it to relax, and see if you can keep it relaxed as you breathe in, as you breathe out. And now do the same with the joints, the third joints of the fingers and thumbs. And now do the same with the bones in the palms of your hands. And now do the same with the bones in the wrists. And now the same with the bones in the forearms. And now with the bones in the upper arms. And now with the bones in the shoulders. Now move your attention down to the first joints of your toes. And from this point on, you can continue the survey at your own pace, going up through the bones of the feet, the ankles, the shins, the thighs, the pelvis, up each vertebra of the spine, up to the skull. And as I said, you can do this at your own pace. The more slowly you do it, the more you see of how you hold tension in the body and how you can release it. If you reach the skull before the end of the meditation, then you can think of the entire skeleton. Think of the whole body relaxing around all the bones. And just hold that perception in mind. But if as you're going up through the body, you lose your focus, go back to whichever bone you remember was the last bone you were focused on, and resume your survey. Now you're welcome to continue the meditation as I start the talk. Last night we talked about the Buddha's image for what happens at death. He says it's like a fire burning a house, and then the fire gets blown by the wind from that house, sets fire to a house nearby, or sometimes a house far away. In other words, it's not the case that if you die in Singapore, you get reborn in Singapore. You can get born anywhere, basically, based on your karma. But the fire here stands for your identity as a being, and the wind stands for what the being clings to, and it's craving. The wind is craving. This is why the Buddha said that the craving that leads to further becoming is the cause of suffering. And you think about what happens as you're dying. You can't stay in this body anymore. And the mind will start thrashing around, especially if it's not trained, looking for anything. And the Buddha he didn't say that all forms of desire are bad. After all, there are some forms of desire that form part of the path. To let go of unskillful qualities, to desire to let go of unskillful qualities is part of the path, part of right effort. To desire to develop skillful qualities is also part of the path. Those desires, the Buddha said, are okay. He encourages them. The desires that lead to suffering are the ones that will grab hold of the mind as you're dying. One of the possibilities is what is called craving for sensuality. Now, sensuality here doesn't mean not so much sensual pleasures. It's the mind's fascination with thinking about sensual pleasures. You can do a thought experiment right now. Suppose you decide you want to have a pizza after the talk. And you could think about, while you're sitting here, a pizza is just a pizza, right? There's nothing much there. It's just dough with stuff on top of the dough. But you can think about, what would I like to have on my pizza? Which pizza shop has the best pizza? And you could spend the entire talk thinking about pizza, not hearing a thing that I'm saying. And the mind tends to fascinate that way. They did a study one time of people listening to talks and discovered that they would listen to about the first 10 minutes, and then the rest of the talk they would start fantasizing about pleasures to get away from the talk. So I've got to get my message in the first 10 minutes here. And so you can imagine you're forced to leave the body, and you're afraid that you're going to lose your sensual pleasures. You lose the ability to enjoy sensuality. So the mind will start, especially if you're feeling pain, because most people, for them, the only alternative to pain is to think about sensual pleasures. So that's where the mind will tend to go. Either sensual pleasures in the past or sensual pleasures that they haven't had in this lifetime and think, I'd like to try that, I'd like to try this. And then their mind will get pulled in that direction. So that's one of the forms of craving that the Buddha said you have to watch out for. The second form is called craving for becoming. We mentioned this briefly last night. I'd like to go into a little more detail about what that means. Becoming is a sense of your identity in a particular world of experience. The world here can be the external world, like we're in the human world right now. But they can also be the imaginary worlds that you have in your mind. And these forms of becoming start with a desire for some particular thing within that world. Think of again, an image that you hold in mind. There's something you want, and then you think about the world around that object. For example, you think about pizza. The first thought would be, where is the nearest pizza shop? Of course, Singapore, you're a lot more sophisticated than pizza, right? Whatever. Where is the nearest pizza shop? How can I get there? Do I have enough money? Of course I have enough money. And you start planning, and the parts of the world that are relevant to that form of becoming are the things either that will help you gain the pizza or that will get in the way. Like right now you've got this monk sitting here talking to you. I'm getting in the way of your pizza. So I'm relevant to this becoming. And then there are other things that would be relevant or irrelevant. One thing and then the question is, how about me? What can I do? Do I have the money? Do I have the ability to get the pizza? If I don't like the pizza that's for sale, do I have the knowledge to make a pizza of my own? You develop an identity within that world around that object. All of that taken together is a form of becoming. And so as you're dying, you realize you can't stay in this body any longer. One of the great fears is that I will be annihilated. There will be nothing left of me. And so you would grab onto just anything, any identity that comes your way, and then actually go into that world. Years back when I was staying in Wat Dhammasathit in Thailand, to make a very long story short, I was bitten by a dog. I got my rabies shot, not my rabies shot, it's a tetanus shot. And then the next morning I was on my arms around, and I happened to go back to the house where the dog bit me. And just as the mother of the house was putting food into my bowl, I fainted. And as I was fainting, I had this vision of a gateway that said America. Fortunately, I didn't die. I just fainted. But Ajaan Fuang said, if I had died at that point, I probably would have gone back to America. So your mind heads out to these things and is looking for some place to go because you realize you can't stay here any longer. So that's another craving that would grab hold of the mind at that moment of death. A third craving that would grab hold of it is if you're so disappointed in your life, so disappointed in say, the pain that comes with illness or the sadness that comes at the end of the life, and you decide, this is not worth it at all, I would just rather be annihilated. I'd like to be oblivious, so I don't have to feel anything at all. That's called craving for non-becoming. Now that's not awakening, it just takes you to this oblivious state where you don't receive any sensory input for a while. And then gradually the mind begins to leave that area and then come back, get reborn in another place. So these are the three main cravings that could lay hold of the mind at the moment of death. And you want to make sure that your mind does not fall for them. I mean, ideally you would say, I don't want to follow any craving at all. That would be the way to gain awakening. And sometimes people make it sound really easy. When the time comes to die, you just let go. But you find that the mind has a lot of things that it wants to hold on to. When it lets go of this, it's going to hold on to that. So you have to have an idea of some of the things that you're going to have to watch out for. Because there's also the issue that comes when you say, well, if I go where my cravings are, that sounds good, I can just go wherever I want to go. But then cravings, have their ways of twisting and turning, and other cravings come in and get in the way. So if you could decide, okay, I don't want to be reborn, I want to gain awakening, but other things will come in the way. So you have to have an idea of how to deal with these particular problems. The first problem, of course, is going to be fear. Someone once came to see the Buddha one time and said, okay, I don't think there's anybody who is not afraid of death. And the Buddha said, well, there are 4 reasons why people would be afraid of death, and if you can get rid of those 4 reasons, then there would be no reason to fear death. The first reason for fearing death would be losing your body. The second one would be losing sensual pleasures. You don't get to enjoy the sensuality you've had in the past. The third would be thinking back on your life and you realize, I've done things that are pretty cruel and heartless and thoughtless. I could be punished for those after death. So some people are afraid of dying for fear of the punishment that might come. And the fourth comes from basically, I don't really know what's going to happen at death. It's a big unknown, a big question mark. I haven't seen the true Dharma. When you've seen the true Dharma, you realize, okay, death is not the end. And you realize that there is a deathless element in the mind that can be contacted within the mind. That relieves your fear of what's going to happen at death. Until you've reached that point, there's always going to be a snagging fear. I really don't know. So these are the 4 reasons that people have for fearing death. So you learn how to prepare yourself. And the best preparation is very simple, it's very basic. Follow the triple training: virtue, concentration, discernment. Virtue is basically resolving, okay, I'm not going to harm anybody. And remember we mentioned last night that you may have done bad things in the past, but when you resolve not to do them again, that resolve not to repeat those past actions, that's good karma right there. And if you can maintain that resolve all the way through death, then that good karma can overpower the karma of the bad things you've done in the past. So if you think of any mistakes you've made in the past, any way you've harmed yourself or harmed others through breaking the precepts, you take the precepts and say, okay, I'm not going to break those precepts over again. That can overcome the fear of punishment that might come after death. As for fear of losing the body, fear of losing sensuality, this is where concentration practice comes in. As I said earlier, for most people, their only alternative to physical pain or mental pain is sensuality. But when you get the mind into a good state of concentration, you find that there is a pleasure that can come that doesn't involve sensual pleasures at all, simply inhabiting your body with a sense of fullness, with a sense of well-being. That doesn't count as a sensual pleasure, that's a pleasure of form. And you realize, okay, this is a better pleasure. It doesn't have the drawbacks of sensuality, it doesn't have all the stickiness of sensuality. It's something that's actually more liberating. And as you get deeper and deeper into concentration, this is an issue that was raised the other night, you may find that the body disappears, and yet your awareness is still there. And you realize, okay, I can still maintain my awareness even without a body. The awareness is something that does not have to depend on a body. And so that can help overcome, to at least some extent, your fear of not having a body. As for the fear that comes from not knowing the deathless, okay, this is where you have to use your discernment. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the course of the talk, but the discernment that basically sees any place that I identify with, as I take on the identity of being a being, there's going to be suffering, but I don't have to take on that identity. The Buddha talks about what he calls the process of I-making and my-making. When you start identifying, this is me, this is mine, this is me, this is mine. And he said, this is something you're doing all the time. You're not just handed a self and say, okay, here's your self, deal with it. You're the one who's constantly creating it. And in creating that, you're creating it out of attachments. And then once you have those attachments, this is the fire in the analogy. Now if you can learn how to let go of your attachments to things, and again, this comes through developing concentration, getting the mind really still, and learning to see that okay, anything that would disturb the concentration is something you don't want to go for. And you learn how to let go of the things that would interfere with the concentration, and we'll deal with these more later in the talk. And then you can turn your analysis onto the concentration itself. You say, this too, even though it's a really good mind state, this too is fabricated. This too is going to end at some point. This too has to be maintained. If I can let go of this, then there's a possibility of encountering something that is not fabricated, which would be the deathless. And when you've had your first taste of that, that erases your fear of what's going to happen at death, because you have seen there is a deathless element that death cannot touch, because this deathless element exists outside of space, outside of time. So no change can touch it at all. So that's how you use the practice of virtue, concentration, and discernment to do away with your fears of death. And that's a pretty tall order, because the issues surrounding concentration are going to be the big issues that hit you at death, particularly in terms of what are called the 5 hindrances. You've probably heard of all these before. There's sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and anxiety, and uncertainty or doubt. And these are the things that you have to overcome in order to get the mind into concentration. These are also the things that the Buddha warns you are going to be your main enemies at the time of death. So these are the things you have to work at. And so as you're sitting and meditating and saying, oh, my mind is overcome with these hindrances, I don't think I can ever get past them, you've got to work on them. These are kind of basic survival skills for the mind. One of our problems in modern society is that our education system sees, what are you talented at? Are you talented at engineering? Okay, here's the engineering course. Are you talented in art? Here's the art course. And we tend to follow, encourage people to follow where they're already talented. But there are lots of areas in life where, whether you're talented or not, you're going to have to learn these skills. And learning how to die properly is one of those skills. Now, do they teach that to you in school? I mean, the important things in life don't get taught to you in school. No matter what, it's not just Singapore, any society, they say, we're going to teach you how to be a good producer and a good consumer, and then when you get old, we'll throw you away. Find somebody else. So you have to take care of yourself, and so you're going to be the one who learns how to overcome these hindrances if you want to be able to focus your mind either on going to a good place after you die, or not going to have to go any place at all. Of these 5, the Buddha said the one that's most worthy of being worried about, or the one you've got to deal with first, is worry itself, doubt itself. When you're worried about, if you have doubt about the Buddha's teachings, okay, that's going to get in the way. You say, gee, I really don't know if it's worth the effort to practice these things. Maybe the Buddha didn't know what he was talking about. That kind of doubt you have to get past. You say, as we said last night, the Buddha couldn't prove the principles of rebirth to you, couldn't prove the principles of karma, but he did say that there are pragmatic reasons for adopting them as working hypotheses. And you need to have a working hypothesis for any area where you really don't know for yourself. And so choose these as your working hypotheses, because for one reason, he said, if you believe that there is rebirth and it is affected by your karma, you will be a better person. You'll behave in a more honorable way. Secondly, when you don't know, why close off the possibility of the end of suffering? By saying, gee, I don't think that happens. If you don't know, why close doors to yourself? Because the teaching on karma is basically saying you have it within you, you have the power to influence your course as you die and as you go on to the next life. Why believe in something that would limit that ability? Or if you have doubts about whether there is such a thing as nirvana or not, we don't know, so why close that off by saying it couldn't exist? Couldn't be. Years back I was talking to a Buddhist scholar in America who was saying he understood what happened with the Buddha's awakening. The Buddha learned how to be equanimous, but he didn't understand what the texts say happened after the Buddha passed away totally, because going into something unconditioned, he said, well, we're conditioned beings ourselves. How can we know something unconditioned? And the answer to that is you've got your priorities wrong. If you start with the definition of yourself and then say, well, because I am this kind of person or because I'm this kind of being, there are certain things I cannot know, certain things I cannot do, you're limiting yourself to no reason at all. I told the scholar, he says, you're like someone who can read only 3 letters at a time. You see the word antelope and all you see is ants. And so as a Buddhist scholar, you talk about the Buddhist theory of ants. But there's more to Buddhism than just ants, okay? And if you tell them that they're antelope, you say, well, ants don't elope, that doesn't make any sense. That gets even worse. So you learn to you say, okay, the Buddha says there is this possibility. I can't close off that possibility. If I do close off that possibility by saying it's impossible, I'm not serving my own best interests. If I leave it open as a possibility, at least I'm making it possible that I could possibly get there. That's something worth going for. That's the second pragmatic proof. So those are some of the ways you can overcome doubt, at least in the beginning, by saying, okay, it's in my best interest to believe in the Buddha's awakening, to believe that he really did know what he's talking about. So that's the first of the hindrances you have to work on. The second one that the Buddha said is important is a hindrance of worry, restlessness and anxiety. And worry here can concern 2 things. One is worrying about the people you're leaving behind. And the other is worrying about where you're going. So worrying about people you're leaving behind, the Buddha said the advice you give, there was one case where a man was sick and his wife went to him and said, look, don't worry about me, don't worry about the kids. I know how I have skills that I can maintain my livelihood, so don't worry about me at all. Don't worry that I stop going to the monastery. In fact, after you die, I'll probably go to the monastery more often. And don't worry about me falling away from the Dharma, because okay, I'm a sincere practitioner. So you don't have to worry about me. You don't have to worry about the children. It turned out the man didn't die at that point. He actually recovered. He went to see the Buddha and he says, you're really fortunate that you have that wife as your teacher. So this is basically advice on how to deal with people you know who are in the course of dying. Make sure that they're not worried about what they're leaving behind. And then also for yourself, if you find that you're worried about your family, you're worried about this, that, and the other thing, remind yourself, the world was able to exist before you were here. It will still be able to exist after you go. It doesn't have to depend on your being here to tell everybody how things should be. As for worrying about where you're going, as I said earlier, if you remind yourself, okay, I may have done bad things in the past, but I have made up my mind that I'm going to follow the precepts and I'm going to abstain from those unskillful things. And then the Buddha says, extend goodwill. This is one of his antidotes to this particular hindrance, is you have goodwill for all beings. Now the goodwill there is for the sake of other beings, so you have goodwill for them, because you've made up your mind not to harm them. Okay, this is going to strengthen that desire. If you have goodwill for yourself, that means if you find yourself berating yourself over your past acts, past actions, thinking how stupid you were, what a horrible person you are, remind yourself, this is not showing goodwill for yourself. There is this tendency, I think a lot of us found this during the pandemic, where suddenly we're trapped home and you start thinking about your past, and oh my gosh, how could I have done those stupid things? Remind yourself, okay, are you the only stupid person in the world? Everybody has done stupid things. Even Einstein did stupid things. So take some courage from the fact that, okay, stupidity is part of the game here. I don't have to get myself worked up about that, because if I'm concerned about my past mistakes, that's not going to give me the energy I need in order to not repeat them. Now there is this tendency which I call dog reasoning, which is that you think if I punish myself enough for having done those bad things in the past, then no punishment will come to me. It's like, you come home from work, the dog has made a mess on the carpet, and it just lies there on its back like this, thinking if I look sorry enough, he's not going to beat me. There is that tendency in the mind. So you remind yourself, okay, this doesn't work. What does work is recognize a mistake, resolving not to repeat it. That's the best that can be asked of a human being. So you have goodwill for yourself, you have goodwill for others. In fact, goodwill is one of the Buddha's antidotes, not only for worry and anxiety, but also for doubt. He says, if you're not really sure about what the true Dharma is, at least you know that having goodwill for everybody is a harmless thing. It's a good thing. If you don't believe in anything at all, or if you doubt everything else, at least don't doubt this. And so focus on, if you have doubts about the Dharma, okay, I'll just focus on having goodwill for everybody. That gives you some strength inside. The third hindrance that the Buddha have you deal with, of course, would be sleepiness, drowsiness, torpor. This is going to be the most difficult one to deal with as you're dying, because, of course, the body is going to get weaker. And if your death is not sudden, you're going to find yourself getting weaker and weaker and more sleepy. That's a natural part of dying. The unnatural part comes, of course, when they give you painkillers. Because many of the painkillers do make you drowsy as part of the effect that they're going to have on you. And so what you want to learn in order to counteract that is what we talked about last night, was learning how to stand up to pain, how to be able to relate to pain in such a way so that even though there may be pain in the body, you're not feeling threatened by it. You're not feeling that it's invading your mind. And the more you're able to be with pain without feeling threatened by it, the less painkillers you're going to need. I mentioned last night the woman who had cancer of the liver, and they offered her all kinds of painkillers, and she said, no, I don't need them. And she'd been able to develop her meditation that well, so that, okay, when the pain came, she was able to relate to the pain in a way where she's not identifying with the pain, didn't identify the pain as having invaded her body, could see the pain as something separate from the body, and both the body and the pain as separate from the mind. When you're able to do that, you can be a lot more alert. It's when they see you moaning and groaning, they're going to shoot you full of painkillers, and you're going to get more sleepy. Now the Buddha doesn't say don't take painkillers. There are some cases where the pain is really overwhelming, but the more you're able to deal with pain, the less they'll have to give you. My teacher had another student who had cancer, and she had many cancers. There's a long litany of, first it was First it was her bladder, then it was her kidneys, then it was her liver, and it just kept moving around the body. And I don't know how many operations she had. And I visited her, though, one time after she'd had a kidney removed. And it was the day after the operation. She was sitting up in bed, and she looked perfectly normal. And I said, "Is there pain?" She said, "Oh, yeah, there's pain, but I don't go there." And she didn't look like anybody like she was in pain at all. So it is possible through the meditation to learn how to be with pain and not suffer from it, as I said last night, using the techniques that I offered you last night. So this is one of the things that's going to help, so they don't shoot you up with painkillers, so that you'll be able to resist the temptation just to drift off and get drowsy. This leaves two other issues, which are ill will and sensual desire. With ill will, of course, the antidote to ill will is developing good will. Many times you'll find yourself you see this on an everyday level, but as you're dying, you can start thinking about what happened to you during this lifetime, and then you can start thinking about the people who mistreated you. And there are people who will get fixated on that. That's not a way you want to die. I mean, you basically are dying out of a sense of revenge. I want to get back at somebody. Now, a life devoted to getting back at somebody is not a good life. So think about the image that the Buddha gave of the man who's been pinned down by bandits, and they're taking a saw and they're cutting him into little pieces. And you can imagine what he could be thinking. So this is unfair, this is not right. Why are these people doing this to me? I want to get back at them. He said, the Buddha, that's not going to be a good mind state to die in. He said you have to have goodwill even for the bandits as they're sawing you up. And then he says, hold that image in mind. And his first reason for teaching that image was cases of people, saying nasty things to you. He says, if you keep this image in mind, you can remind yourself, at least they're not cutting me into little pieces. They may say horrible things about you, and they may treat you unfairly. He says, at least they're not cutting me into little pieces. The Buddha says to have goodwill for people who are cutting me into pieces. I can still have goodwill for this person. Now, this is something that you have to work up to. Because there are sometimes when people have mistreated you, and you say, I just can't have goodwill for that person. Then you ask yourself, do you have goodwill for yourself? That would be part of the mindset, I don't care. And when you deal with that state of mind, then the Buddha would recommend, it's not the most honorable line of thinking, but he said, you think about the fact that if I act on my anger, I'm going to do stupid things. And we've seen this all around us. People out of anger say things and do things that are really not in their best interests, long-term interests, but they do it just because out of the force of that moment they feel, I want to do this. So suppose I do something stupid, that's going to please my enemy. Now, do I want to please that bastard? And the answer is no. Okay, so because I don't want to please him, I'm not going to act on my anger. That's called using spite to overcome anger. It's not the most skillful mind state, but sometimes that's what you need when you're so upset. And then after you begin to calm down a little bit, then you begin to realize, okay, this is really not helping me to have this ill will. You know the old image of anger is like a burning coal. If you pick up the burning coal to throw at somebody else, who are you burning first? You're burning yourself. So you remind yourself, okay, by focusing on this anger, by focusing on this ill will, wanting to see this person suffer, I'm actually creating suffering for myself. So here's another case where you want to develop goodwill to counteract that particular hindrance. Then finally, of course, there's the hindrance of sensual desire. As I said earlier, when you're dying and you're in pain, this is one of the escapes that people find. Just think about some sensual fantasy, and then the mind will tend to go in that direction. So you have to use what powers you have of concentration, but also remind yourself, sensual pleasures are not really all that reliable, and they're not all that safe. The Buddha gives lots and lots of analogies for sensuality, and this is probably one of our various hindrances and our various defilements. This is the one that probably thinks it's the most clever. that I'm able to fantasize about a sensual pleasure, and maybe I'm able to, based on my fantasies, I can give rise to that sensual pleasure. There's a lot of pride that goes in sensuality. You've got to work on seeing, okay, it's really kind of stupid. Years back I was invited to give a talk in a university in America, to a religion class. The professor was an old friend of mine from school. And then after I had given the talk, a week later he got in touch with me again. He gave me some of the reactions that the students had. And there was one woman in there who was said she was really surprised to find that there would be a monk who would be intelligent. Because she figured that people who don't go for sensuality are sort of subhuman. They just can't, they don't have the imagination, they don't have the intelligence, so they're just kind of dumb. And so that shows you the pride that goes with sensuality. So you've got to work on the pride that you might have on, I'm able to fantasize about this, I'm able to fantasize about that. And you realize it's really kind of dumb. Ajaan Fuang had a good comment one time. He said that the sensual pleasures that you thirst after, that you find obsessing the mind, you have to assume that you've had them before in the past. And you miss them, which is why you want them again. And he says, think about that for a few minutes. You get them again, what's going to happen? You're going to lose them again, you're going to want them again. So when you start thinking, gee, I never had this pleasure, I never had that pleasure, you've had those pleasures in the past. Just assume that. And if you go for them again, you're going to lose them again and miss them again. And it's just an endless cycle. So learn how to view your sensual pleasures in that light. The other analogies that the Buddha gives, he says, one is like a dog chewing on a bone that doesn't have any meat. I mean, it doesn't get any nutrition out of it at all. You can think about sensual pleasures, there's no nutrition there. And Ajaan Lee expands on this analogy. He says, it's like the dog is, what flavor is there in the bone? The flavor is all in the dog's saliva. So when you're fantasizing about a sensual pleasure, you think, this is my saliva. Changes the equation. He says it's like a bead of honey on the blade of a knife. Okay, there's a little bit of pleasure, but there's a lot of danger. It's like a hawk that's got a piece of meat. It's flying away, other hawks and crows come after it, and if it doesn't let go of that meat, it's going to get killed. And you gain a sensual pleasure, other people are going to want it. Other people will be jealous of you. So it's not gaining much of anything worth at all. So when you can learn to think in these ways about your sensual pleasures, realizing that there's no sustenance there, there's a lot of danger. And it's got the kind of food that once you eat it, you just want more and more and more, and it's not going to be good for you. When you learn to think about your lust in this way, a lot of the pride that goes around lust, a lot of the pride that goes around sensual thoughts, gets lessened. So these are some of the hindrances that could come at the moment of death. This is one of the reasons why, as they say, when you're practicing meditation, you're practicing how to die. When you're dying, worry will come, or doubt will come, or sloth and torpor, ill will come, sensual desire will come. And you need to have ammunition to use against these things. So instead of just having a blanket statement saying, well, just let go of everything and you'll be okay, specific things will come up, specific defilements have their specific hooks. And the way to deal with each of these defilements, the Buddha gives you a five-fold processes. One, when you see them come, what sparks them? What's the origination? Say anger comes. Okay, what sparked the anger? Now sometimes we'll say, well, so-and-so did this. But you might ask yourself, is every instance of that going to make you angry? Why does this particular instance make you angry? Now some cases it may be because you expected something better out of that person, or you placed your hopes in that person. Some of the cases though, it's just, you're looking for something to get angry about. And this person provided the excuse. So it's not just that things outside are happening to us. Sometimes the mind is in the mood to get worked up about something. So you have to ask yourself, okay, what sparked that inside? Because when the Buddha is talking about origination, he's not talking about things outside. He's asking, what inside you will cause that to happen? And then the second question is, can you see it pass away? Because say anger arises. It's not the case that anger lasts for 24 hours without break. It's going to have its moments. It comes in a few moments, and then you drop it. And then for some reason you pick it up again. What happened? When you dropped it, why did you drop it? There's a famous story in Thailand. There was a monk, Jokun Ubali, was a friend of Ajahn Mun's, but he was a monk in Bangkok. And he had a reputation for having a very sharp tongue. In fact, some of the wealthier people in Bangkok would go to see him. He said, well, nobody at home dares speak to me in harsh terms. He'll speak to me in harsh terms. I need a good lesson. Well, there was this one woman one time who had lost her son. And she was really upset because she had only the one son. He was in his early 20s. And she felt a great loss for having at his death. And so she went to see him to see if he might give her some comfort. And she said, I can think of nothing but how much I miss my son right now. And he said, you're just saying that because you want other people to be impressed with your grief. She was shocked. How could he say that? So she didn't even bow down, she left. And she went home. And she was angry for about an hour until she realized during that entire hour she did not think about her son. All she could think about was how angry she was at Jokun Ubali. So she went back and she bowed down. This just goes to show, sometimes we drop our one particular defilement because we have another defilement. But our defilements don't last 24/7. They come and they go and they come and they go. So you want to see that. When they come, what sparked them? When they go, what did I let go of that made me lose interest? And then when they come again and again, okay, ask yourself, why is it that the mind goes for them? What is the allure? Now in the case of anger, you say, well, I really don't like my anger. But then part of the mind does like anger. You feel that you have a certain amount of power, you feel you have a certain right to say things. Your feelings of shame and compunction just go out the window. So what is it that you like about anger? This is where it's valuable to see the mind as a committee. You've got some committee members who really enjoy anger and they're looking for an opportunity. And this provided the opportunity. So what do they like about anger? This of the 5 steps that the Buddha offers, this is probably the most difficult one to admit to yourself, because many times the reasons you have for liking a defilement are things you're not proud of. And so you tend to hide them from yourself. But if you want to get past that to particular defilement, you have to see, okay, what is it that I like? And sometimes the mind will give a reason, but it's not the real reason. So you have to keep coming back again and again and again to this. And then the 4th step is to look for the drawbacks. If I follow through with this defilement, where is it going to take me? What harm is this going to do to me? What harm is this going to do to other beings? And then when you can compare the allure with the drawbacks, and you finally see the allure was really stupid, it's not worth the drawbacks, that's when you develop dispassion and that's when you let go. So those are the 5 steps for overcoming any particular defilement. Seeing the origination, what inside you sparked it to begin with. Seeing its passing away. When it passed away, what also passed away with it. So you can see the connections. 3rd is, what is the allure? Why did you like it? 4th, what are the drawbacks? And then the escape is dispassion. Now, dispassion is one of those words that people don't tend to like much. It sounds kind of gray and dull. So the best way to regard it is basically growing up. There are things that you liked as you were a child, but then you begin to realize there's really nothing there. You've gone beyond it. And that's basically the Buddha's attitude towards, first, anything that's going to pull you away from the path. And then ultimately even to the path itself. But you don't let go of the path until the path has done all of its work. You can make a comparison. Did we talk about tic-tac-toe the other night? Tic-tac-toe is one of those games as a child you found fascinating until you began to realize there are only so many ways you can play tic-tac-toe. And you figure them all out, and once you start, you know who's going to win. And you lose interest. You never play tic-tac-toe again unless you want to teach it to a child. But for your own sake, you don't find any enjoyment there. So that's one form of dispassion. We say, okay, I've seen all the alternatives, all the possibilities. There's nothing there. That has nothing new to offer to me. That's one form of dispassion. The other form of dispassion is chess. You can get really good at chess, but what does it accomplish? There's nothing much there. You can learn all the techniques, and you're never going to know all the possible ways of playing chess. But you begin to realize, what do I learn from playing chess? I just learn how to move these pieces around, but when I win, what have I done? And you see that it's all very limited, and it's not worth all the effort that goes into it. That's another reason for dispassion. We had a visitor at the monastery last month. He was an Israeli. He had played on the Israeli handball team. And they'd gone to an international competition one time, and they'd won. They did much better than they thought they would. And then he woke up the next day and he said, "Is this all there is? You win, but it's what, you know?" So he gave up handball. Now he's going to become a monk. That's dispassion. You see that there's really nothing there. So when you can see your defilements, that there's really nothing there that's worth the effort that goes into it, that's when you let go. So you focus on the path so that you can get past these hindrances and all these other things that would ultimately, otherwise are just going to take over and pull you down. Because when we talk about what happens at death, it's not like somebody's going to be there holding their hand telling you what to do. You have to remember these lessons. You have to maintain your mindfulness. You have to maintain your concentration. There's a lot of skill that goes into dying well. So you want to work at those skills so that even as your mind begins to fade as you're dying, you still have some skills you can fall back on. As I said, these are the skills you need for the survival of your well-being. You're not just going to sit there and say, "Well, this is the way death is. Isn't this interesting that this is what death is like?" You're not a passive observer. You're an active participant, and you want your active participation to be skilled, so you're not causing any harm to yourself. You're not going to cause harm on other beings. So you want to work on these skills to overcome your fear of death, overcome the hindrances that would get in the way, so that you can overcome those kinds of craving that would pull you to places you don't want to go. Now ideally, as I said, given the image that the Buddha gave of the fire, you want to learn how to put out the fire. And if we have questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them. But the first thing you've got to learn how to do is, how do I control this wind so that it doesn't pull me in ways that I'm going to regret afterwards? And it's something where you can make a difference. All too often we hear the Buddhist teachings on karma as basically saying, well, whatever's going to be is going to be, there's nothing much I can do about it. That's not the case. He taught karma in such a way to say, okay, there are things you can do. You can really make a big difference in your life as you live it now, and also as you prepare for dying to go on to the next life. So look at the skills you have and see, okay, where are my skills lacking? And then you can work on building up those skills. This is why the Buddha said, when you focus on the present moment, it's not just to be in the present moment, it's because to remind yourself, one, death could happen at any time, and two, there's work that has to be done to prepare. And this is a moment where I can do that. Each time you breathe in, each time you breathe out, whether you're sitting and meditating, whether you're out working, out in the street, working in an office, whatever you're doing, you can always make sure that your mind heads in a skillful direction. You can do that work. And that determination that no matter what, I'm going to try to choose the skillful alternative, that's what's going to see you through. That's what you can hold on to. Ajahn Mun, toward the end of his life, gave one last long Dharma talk. And he ended up by saying, it's like going into battle, and you use your discernment as your weapon, and you use your concentration and mindfulness as your support, the food and things that the soldier has. What I always found interesting was, who is the soldier? And he said, the soldier is the determination not to come back and become the laughing stock of your defilements ever again. Okay, I don't want my greed, aversion, and delusion to say, ha ha ha, I got you this time. Again and again and again and again. Maybe someday you'll get to laugh instead. And when you have the last laugh, that's when the last laugh is good. So that's my talk for tonight. Any questions?
Bhante, we are all lay people, so we have our worldly pursuits, and maybe we have other concerns like learning, appreciating the final things in life. How do we balance all these final worldly pursuits with our practice? Because our practice should be very urgent, since death, illness, and old age are coming. But how do we balance this with our worldly pursuits?
Okay, the first thing is make sure that worldly pursuits don't go against the precepts. I mean, this is something you can do as you go through the day. And there's one of the big temptations of the precepts, the Buddha said the most important one is against lying. And I don't know how many people say, well, in business they have to lie. No. I'll lose the contract. We'll lose the contract. It's much better to lose the contract than to lose your precepts, you know.
But one day sometimes we do lie to protect people, and we do not want to disclose certain confidential things.
Okay, well that's how you don't have to lie, you just say it. You find ways of not giving that information. You know, what did so-and-so do the other day? And pretend you didn't hear the question. Or pretend that you misunderstood the question and you answer a different question. I'm serious.
Then you may have to end up using some harsh word at the person to warn him or her not to ask. It will be very unpleasant.
What is this?
I mean, if you have to use this way, right, in the end, right, you have to use harsh word, which is also another unskillful speech. To warn the person to not ask this question again is very unpleasant also.
Okay. I don't understand what you're saying.
So, I mean, this is a word.
Learn how to avoid giving information. Don't give false information, but learn how to avoid certain information. And also learn how to think to yourself. When I was teaching in America, sometimes this issue comes up, and some people say, well, what about X? In Massachusetts, the question was, what about filling out my tax forms? If I tell the government how much money I'm making, they're going to use that money to finance wars and things. And in California, the question is, what if my friend comes with an ugly dress and says, how do I look? That one's easy. Just think about it. She looks better dressed than she does undressed. So, so observe the precepts. This is how you prepare yourself properly. Because realize, you can just tell somebody, I just can't tell you that information. You don't have to act smart. You just say, I can't tell you that information. Because you gain, a little bit of money and the money goes. And you've lost your precept. You've lost your self-respect. So that's the first thing. And then as for meditation, you say, okay, I can be mindful as I go through the day. And observing the precepts, you develop mindfulness, alertness, ardency. These are the qualities you're going to need when you go home to meditate. And so you make your daily life part of the meditation. When the Buddha has the example of a layperson dying. And one of his ways of dealing with a layperson dying, he shows how you can get the layperson all the way to awakening as they're dying. And this is not just monks, you know. It's an interesting technique that he uses. You ask the person, are you worried about anything? If you're worried about your family, well, there's nothing you can do for your family right now. You've just got to let them go. You're dying. Focus on dying properly. Are you afraid of losing human sensuality? And the person says yes. There are devas who have better sensuality. Focus your mind there. And he takes them up level by level by level to the levels of heaven. Finally gets to the level of the Brahmas. Okay, the Brahmas have better pleasures than the sensual devas. Focus your mind there. And then when we get there, okay, even Brahmas suffer from self-identity. It would be good if you could let go of your self-identity, the things that you identify with. And he says, if you can do that at the moment of death, then your release is the same as the release of a monk. So this is not asking too much of lay people. Our problem is we give too much importance to the world. And does the world give us importance? No.
Ajahn, when we talk about insight, knowledge, or wisdom that we gain from our practice, we know from the story that when at that time a man called Upatissa, which is supposed to be Venerable Sariputta in future, when he heard from one of the 5 ascetic, Asaji, then he became Sotapan. May I know that actually what happened when hearing what Venerable Asaji say? What actually transformed the mind of Upatissa become?
When you're listening to a Dharma talk, in the cases where people are listening to a Dharma talk and they gain awakening, they're not just listening to the words. They're focusing. Okay, what does these words have to say about what's going on in my mind? Now, in his particular case, the question is, anything that arises has a cause. And then, okay, basically the cause, when there's a cause, that thing will end when the cause ends. So for him, the big issue was, why is my mind suffering? So he looked inside and he saw it was the craving. Now, because his wisdom was really, really sharp. You could read that passage again and again and again and not get any awakening. But he listened to it once, and that he was focused on that problem already. So that sort of gave him the insight. This is where I attack the problem.
So you mean that we have to analyze it and then understand
Different people
it?
are going to. There is no one insight method. But those 5 steps that I gave you, basically, those are the Buddhist ways of. Steps that the Buddha recommends for gaining insight. Whatever you have that's weighing the mind down, ask, what's the origination? How does it pass away? In that order, you're looking for the cause. Okay, what's the allure? Why do you like it? What are the drawbacks? You realize this really is worth giving up. And then you develop dispassion for it. Now, the things that you are passionate about that are holding you back are going to be different from the things that other people are feeling passionate about or holding them back. Which is why there's no one insight method.
This kind of insight or knowledge, can we train or we can train ourselves?
It's called doing concentration practice. Sometimes you hear that concentration is not necessary for insight, but the Buddha himself never said that. Because as you deal in concentration practice, you're getting more and more sensitive to what's going on in the mind, how the process of cause and effect act in your mind. What causes your mind to be disturbed, what causes your mind to be calm. You see cause and effect because you're working with them. You see the 5 aggregates because you're working with them. You've got form, the breath, feeling, the feeling of pleasure that comes with that, perception, the image you hold in mind of the breath, fabrication, the thoughts you have around making the breath comfortable, consciousness. You've got 5 aggregates right there in the concentration. And as you work with them, you get a better sense of them. And through that you get more and more sensitive to how they are acting in your mind. And then when the time comes to let them go, you know what to let go of. So work on your concentration.
Okay, maybe another aspect, we talk about mano karma. So we have action, speech and mind. We can produce karma. I want to talk about this mano karma. So when we are not mindful, sometime in our mind may arise this bad thought or unwholesome mind. But in a speed of a second, there's a right effort coming. We understand there's a rising of the bad thought. We understand it and then we push it down. My question is that when at the first that there's unwholesome mind coming out, is that already considered as a akusala mano karma?
No, when a thought like that comes into the mind without any bidding, that's the result of past karma. So the fact that it's there doesn't mean that you're adding new bad karma. It's what you do with it. That's going to be the new karma.
So when there's a right effort coming in, understand that one, can it become a good karma? Or
That's the whole point. There's a hand out there.
Hi, Ajahn. One question on meditation. When we sit and we notice a restless mind that relates to Dhamma reflections, how do we know if it's a good approach as compared to if it's just too much intellectualization?
Ask yourself if your thinking has anything to do with what you're doing right now. If it's thoughts that pull you away from observing what's going on inside, okay, that's too much intellectualization. But it's like, does this insight reflect on something I'm doing right now? Can I apply it to my mind right now? And if not, just let it go.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn.
Ajahn, why the fourth precept is more important than the first precept?
What?
Why the fourth precept?
Oh, why is it?
The musafada is more important than another precept.
Okay, if you kill somebody, then they're just dead once, right? But if you lie to them, sometimes they will believe something that will cause them to do bad things for a long time to come. You have to be very careful. And it's interesting that the Buddha points this out. He says, if you feel no shame at telling a deliberate lie, there is nothing that you would regard as not doing, that you couldn't do. That's the sign. When you look at somebody else, if they feel no shame at telling a deliberate lie, stay away from that person. Because you can't trust them.
Thank you.
Ajahn, thank you. I probably have got 3 questions. Number 1 is, you mentioned about focus going to a good place, something like that. So I'm just wondering, what would a good place constitute?
A place you can practice the Dharma.
Once again?
A place that you can practice the Dharma.
Okay. Like born to Buddhist family and things, something like that?
Well, I wasn't born in a Buddhist family, but I guess I practice the Dharma.
Okay. All right. So the idea is to be reborn in where you can practice the Dhamma.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Thank you. The second one, what's it? Okay. Okay, the part that you were saying about the bandit cutting up the person, and yet the person, how shall I say, it's good to have
Goodwill for them.
goodwill.
the bandits.
So I'm imagining how would the mind be like? What is it? How would goodwill be like at that point of time?
You're just thinking, these poor bandits are creating such bad karma for themselves. It would be a good thing if they stopped.
I see.
You're thinking about for their sake. What they're doing is not good for them. That would be goodwill.
Okay. Do you also wish them to be well and happy or something like that?
Not, may
Not
you be
necessarily.
happy cutting me up. No. May you realize this is a bad thing you're doing. Make it stop cutting me up. But it's for your sake. I'm not concerned about this body. If I have the karma that I have to be cut up, that's my karma. But don't you take on that karma.
Okay. Then the third one is you could have said something along that line, but I didn't really catch it. The idea I'm asking is, how can one make peace with oneself and others, especially when time is short?
Okay, basically to be at peace with yourself and others is realizing that time is short. How can I help this other person? How can I help myself develop in skillful qualities? So you don't regret having wasted your time. Because the regret for wasted time is one of the big things that disturbs the peace of mind. Realize I could have done good, but I didn't do it. I could have controlled my actions when I was thinking of doing something bad, but I didn't control them. I just let it out. You feel bad about that.
So if, let's say, there are guilt feelings, then how?
Okay, then you just realize it's a good thing that I recognize that was a mistake. And I can resolve not to repeat that. That's the best that can be asked of a human being. There was a philosopher one time who said, we live forward but understand backward. In other words, we're making decisions that are going to be influencing the future, but we really only understand what's already happened. So we have to, we can learn from what's already happened, but many times we may make a mistake about what we think this action is going to lead to in the future. So that's the situation in which we find ourselves. So it's only natural that when we look back and say, oh yeah, that was a mistake. And so the proper attitude is, okay, I recognize that mistake, I'm determined not to repeat it, and then goodwill for everybody.
All right. Could I just ask one more question? The idea about painkillers, you were saying, I think the idea I got is that we should try not to take painkillers that will cloud our mind. But when you're working with people with a lot of pain, I think the healthcare professionals actually encourage the patients to take painkillers to relieve pain for good reasons. There are also, if I'm not mistaken, there are also probably monks that encourage that, say, go ahead, take the painkiller more for self-compassion. So how do we reconcile to take or not to take?
Okay. For your own sake, you should learn how much pain that you can manage. I mean, this is not out saying that they should stop putting painkillers in people, because a lot of people don't know how to handle pain. In which case, they go ahead and give the painkiller. But for people who do have practice in learning how to handle pain, you can lower the dosage. Sometimes you may want to take the edge, as we say in English, take the edge off the pain, but don't cloud the mind. And they've done studies where people put people on what's called a morphine drip, where they can control the amount of morphine they're getting. And they find that they use a lot less than the nurses tend to give. Because the nurse may be on a round where they have to treat lots of people. And they say, well, shoot them up for 24 hours. And then when I come back in 24 hours, okay, I'll shoot them up again. And so they have to give too much in order to keep them pain-free for 24 hours. Whereas if someone is there, they can control the amount, and they tend to use much less.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Okay.
John.
There was another hand over here just now. Yes.
Ajahn, regarding facing the sensual pleasures. I have this committee that says that you just hold up, you just practice kanti. The committee that says about the drawbacks usually are not very strong. But I have one committee who is very twisted. He would just say that, you just succumb to this once, and then you have all the chemical endorphins into your brain, and then you'll be fine. Instead of just keep thinking about it. And then you would say is that, as long as you succumb to this more enough, and then you will get dispassion about it. It's just like you have enough of, you crave for pizza, and you have a lot of pizza, and then you wouldn't have it for a long, long time.
This is why we keep getting reborn again and again and again. Tell that committee members, I've listened to that enough, I've heard that reason enough, and it doesn't work. And if it tells you, well, you're going to give in to me in 5 minutes, so why don't you give in to me now? Just get it over with, and say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 minutes, but right now I'm going to say no. And then it comes back in 5 minutes and say, no. 5 minutes, no. And then it's going to threaten you. It said, if you don't give in to me, I'm going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The way it does that is that it takes over your breath energy in the body and makes it hard to stand. But now when you learn how to do breath meditation, you say, I'm going to take my breath back. I'm going to control the way I breathe. And you realize these things come and they go. And they don't add up. Because that's the image they like to threaten you with. Because if I come once, I come twice, and 3 times, and it's going to build. So you come once, you just come once. You come the second time, it's still just one. It comes the third time, it's still just one. And you breathe through the tension. Hand over here. Is the mic over here?
Hi, Ajahn. Just now you shared with us how to control the wind. Is there something?
Yeah.
Just now you shared with us how to control the wind. So, is there anything to say about the flame and the houses?
About the what?
Oh, just now you shared with us how to control the wind.
Yeah.
Is there anything to share about the flame and the houses?
Building the houses?
Just about the houses and the flame. Is there any way to control those?
Okay, well, last night I was talking about how to build good houses around you by developing conviction in what the Buddha taught, practicing virtue, practicing generosity, practicing your discernment. These things are the good things that build good houses for you in the future. The Buddha also gives a list of what he calls the 5 strengths. These 2 will build good houses. Again, it's conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, discernment. You can work on these qualities. So that if it turns out you can't stop the wind, at least go to a good house. You've got good houses around. Just be very careful that you don't build a lot of good houses and then say, to hell with that, I'm going to go someplace else.
Ajahn, how do we learn to live with the pain when, like, every other day we don't really experience much pain?
How do we learn how to live with pain when?
Every other day we don't really experience much pain.
Okay, if you want pain, sit for a couple hours. And then you realize, and that's the ideal pain to work with, because you realize, okay, this pain doesn't mean that I'm harming my body. We had the question the other night about fearing that your legs are going to fall off. Your legs are not going to fall off. And you realize that when you get up and you walk around a little bit, okay, the stiffness will go away. So it's not a sign that something bad is happening to the body. So now I can focus directly on how is my mind creating suffering around the pain. And it's going to come down to the perceptions you hold about the pain, how you image the pain in your mind, how you talk to yourself about the pain, what intentions you have around the pain. If you intend to make the pain go away, sometimes it gets more stubborn. So if you say, my intention is to understand the pain, and that's going to come down to understanding how do I perceive the pain, what perceptions add more problems to the pain that don't have to be there. So basically, pain is a really good way of understanding your mind. An image I like to use is suppose you're going to shoot a documentary of the wildlife out in a savanna. You don't go roaming around the whole savanna looking for wildlife. You go to the waterhole. And in the course of the day, everybody in the savanna is going to come to the waterhole. In the same way, when you're sitting there with pain, every defilement in your mind is going to come and show the stripes. And you begin to realize, okay, these are the things that I'm telling myself that make the pain worse. Why do I believe them? Why do I hold on to them? Why do I keep repeating them to myself when I can let them go? That's how you learn about pain.
Ajahn, in the booklet that you've translated for Ajahn Lee's instructions on meditation, a small booklet, there was a part where you explained about when the mind being refined enough and focused enough, you redirect it to past life. Would you be able to elaborate on that, please?
Okay, this is one of the talents that Ajahn Lee had. I don't have it. But basically, you get the mind into the fourth jhana, and then you pull out a little bit and you ask these questions. You go, what can I learn about past lives? So you're not totally in the jhana, but you're just pulling out slightly. And you can ask these questions. And some people, when they do that, they get answers. And he had the karmic background that he had all these abilities. Apparently there was one thing he could not do, and he could not levitate. But he could get other people to levitate. And I have two stories, for entertainment purposes. Once the monks were had gone to Ayutthaya, this is back in the days before the old palace in Ayutthaya had been turned into a national park. So it was just a place where people could come and go. And they have these big putsa trees. I don't know what it is. What's the Singaporean English for putsa? It's like a little tiny apple. And then the trees are huge. They have these big limbs that spread out very far. And so the monks were sitting, meditating one night in a circle under one of these trees. And they'd brought along a young boy named Manun. He was about 13, 14 years old. And so Ajahn Lee had Manun sit in the middle of the circle. And they hung a rope down from one of the branches. And Ajahn Lee says, okay, tonight we're going to make you levitate. And Ajahn Fuang thought to himself, what do you mean, we? You are going to make him levitate. And so they told Manun, okay, if you find yourself coming off the ground and you feel scared, hold on to the rope. And so they sat there, and all of a sudden, sure enough, comes up off the ground. And Manun realized he was levitating. He didn't have the mindfulness to grab hold of the rope, and he fell down. And Ajahn Fuang said he couldn't sit down for a couple of days after that. That was the story Ajahn Fuang told me. There was another story that I heard that Ajahn Fuang had told Ajahn Mahabua about another time. They were sitting in a circle like this, and Ajahn Fuang begins to notice that the monk next to Ajahn Lee was coming off the ground, back down. Then the next monk, off the ground, back down, around the circle. So Ajahn Fuang said, he's not going to get me off the ground. And so it comes the monk next to him, up off the ground. And then there's just like this force coming up under him. He says, no, earth element, earth element, earth element. And so that stopped. Then the monk next to him off the ground. And then as they finished the meditation that night, Ajaan Lee turned to Ajaan Fuang and said, "Stubborn?" So if you want to know how to do that, ask Ajaan Lee. There was a hand in the back.
Hi, sorry, Ajahn. Yeah, here.
Okay.
I actually work in hospital. We have a lot of patients that are terminally ill. They're on breathing tube and like they have already have brain death and or even last stage cancer. So we actually have to remove the breathing tube for them. So just wanted to ask, like, if we are the one that remove the tube, right? Do we break the precept, like first precept?
No. Because the first precept means you're not cutting off the life faculty of how long they would live without assistance. I think you've been giving them assistance, and you realize, okay, they're brain dead. You remove the assistance, they're going to die on their own. You're not killing them.
Okay. Sorry, there's still another question. For those that terminally ill patient, right, we will tend to give very, very, very high dose sedation, fentanyl, propofol, and everything, so that they can pass peacefully. So do we like commit any do we break the precepts also? Because
No, you're not breaking a precept again. And again, there's some people who just cannot handle pain. The advice I'm giving tonight is for what you can do so that when you become a patient, you can ask for less.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Ajahn, sorry. Okay, so I have 3 short questions. So I'm an educator, a teacher. So when we talk about precepts, like when I deal with the youth, a lot of times they will, like we get into some philosophical discussion, how do we frame the 3rd and the 5th precept to them such that it creates a positive, they can see that it's positive. Because nowadays they feel that if they don't try, they won't know. So they, in Singaporean term, is die also must try. Try until they know it's bad, then they will stop. But how do we frame it to them that that's unskillful?
Because it's stupid to say, I'm not going to see that this is harmful unless I see that it's harmful for me. You see the harm that it does for other people. That's the wise person, is someone who sees other people engage in this kind of activity and it's causing them harm. So do I really need to prove this again to myself?
Okay, thank you. So the second question is, I had a parent. The parent drinks, but he doesn't want the son to drink. So his strategy is when he turns 18, he's going to ask all his good friends to make his son so drunk and then take a video of him when he's drunk so that he will be so adverse by that situation that he won't want to drink ever again. So my question is that a skillful way of getting the son not to drink?
Not especially, no. I'd say get the parent really drunk and take a video of him.
Okay, so the last question, a bit more serious, is since you are talking about death, I've ever broached the topic of death to younger people, like my friends, but their response is always, my life is just beginning, why are you talking to me about death? So how do we broach the topic in a positive way that they can see that knowing that death is around every time, anytime, is something that's good for them to know?
Okay, well, there's that idea that I'm too busy living my life, I can't think about death. But then the question of, okay, when death comes and what's going to happen at death is something you have to think about, so you can actually decide what is a good life to live. If you don't know how it's going to end, you don't know what the skills you're going to need at death. For most of them, they don't think you don't need any skills to die, you just die. But, okay, the body just dies, but the mind doesn't just die. It actually makes important choices at the moment of death. And so if it hasn't been properly trained, it's not going to be making good choices.
Okay.
The Buddha gives the analogy of the dirt under his fingernail. He one day he just took a little dirt under his fingernail. He says, which is more, the dirt under my fingernail and the dirt in the earth? And the monks say, well, of course, the dirt in the earth is more. And the Buddha says, in the same way, human beings who, when they die, go to the lower realms are like the dirt in the earth. Those who stay on as human beings or go to a higher level are like the dirt under my fingernail. That's pretty scary. Think about how many people die unskillfully. And so you guys say, okay, there are certain skills I'm going to need, and I don't know when I'm going to need them. I might need them tomorrow. It's not only, decrepit old people who die. Some people, they're born and they die within a few hours. And all the way, people can die at any age. So tell them, okay, death is something that requires skill. And so you're going to need those skills.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn.
There's a hand behind. Can you pass the mic to the back?
Got it.
Thank you, Ajahn, for your teachings. My question is...
Just a little...
Pass it to you afterwards.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's with me. My question is related to meditation. Sometimes when we meditate, the mind becomes very glad. But should we maintain that gladness, or should we make it more still? This is in relation to, especially like if death comes, or
Okay, well, the skill of learning how to make your mind glad is a skill that's worth developing. So when the gladness comes, don't just throw it away. Learn how to maintain it. And that will be one of your many skills that you have as a meditator. There'll be other times when you're meditating and the gladness doesn't come. But you say, okay, at least I know how to maintain my mind without the gladness as well. So you want to develop several skills as a meditator, not just one. But that is an important skill to have.
Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Okay, last question in the back.
Right at the back. Please pass the mic right to the back.
Way to the back.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Ajahn. So thank you for the wonderful 3 talks. So my question is, how can we cultivate the right view in daily so that we can have the correct, so-called correct verification in our daily practice? Thank you.
Okay, right view in daily life means realizing that if you're suffering, it's not because of what other people are doing, it's because of your way of processing your experience in the world. And so don't go around blaming other people for your miseries. I mean, other people can be behaving really, really poorly, as we see all around us. But that doesn't mean that we have to suffer from that. That's basically what right view comes down to. The suffering is inside, and we can treat it inside ourselves.
So that being said, when we have the right view, being compassionate toward others, and we form the verification to ourselves that people are also suffering, then we just be good to them and be good with ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Right?
And to whatever extent if you see someone else is suffering and if you can give them some useful advice that they're willing to take, that's way of showing compassion. It's interesting, the Buddha says, when you break the precepts, you're harming other people. If you want to harm, when you break the precepts, you're harming yourself. If you want to harm other people, get them to break the precepts. And conversely, if you want to help other people, learn how to get them not to break the precepts. That's the best way of showing compassion. Okay. That was short. We have time for one more.
Yes, it's pretty interesting that you draw a parallel between the process of meditation and the process of dying. And yesterday you mentioned this book, Straight from the Heart. I remember that Mahabua Nana Sapano.
Ajahn Mahabua.
Ajahn Mahabua, sorry. Honorifics, yes. Ajahn Mahabua shared his meditative experience, which sounds pretty advanced, that when his mind collected together, everything collects together and his thoughts outflowing, he experienced this very luminous, unbounded state of mind that is totally free of all kinds of defilements. And obviously he's teaching it to that terminal cancer patient, like sort of like nudging her towards that direction. So is that the end state that we are all aiming for?
Yep.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, it reminds me of I find it quite intriguing because, I mean, I have a Tibetan Buddhist background, and we do have a name for that state of mind. We call it the clear light mind.
Okay, well, there are different luminous states of mind. There's the luminous mind of concentration, there's the luminous mind of the awakening mind, which is totally unfabricated. And so you've got to test it, because when you hit the luminous mind of concentration, if you don't test it thoroughly, you may assume that it's the awakened mind. Like Ajahn Mahabua, there's one point where he said his mind, everything became luminous, and he assumed this must be it. But then he also began to realize after a while that there comes a point where you have to maintain the luminosity. You can lose it. If you can lose it, then it's not unfabricated. So he said, I have to remove all my attachment to this as well, and basically try to destroy this state of mind. And that's when he came through to something that was, he said it wasn't even luminous, it was just clear and pure.
Yes, I do recall that part. He said that he sort of like detected there's some kind of a frame of reference, a fixation on that luminous state, and he knew it wasn't the final thing. So he kind of like inspired himself to make further progress in his meditation. And
so the lesson there is whatever comes up, you have to test it. Because there are many states of, many levels of luminosity in the mind. And he said that it was, when he got to the pure state of mind, it wasn't luminous anymore. It was something that's beyond luminosity. It was pure. So that's where we're aiming.
so is that kind of like, to put this into the analogy of, the burning house?
That's when the fire goes out.
That's where the fire goes out and you don't build any houses anymore.
There's no building of any houses. There's no building of any houses, there's no wind, there's no fire.
Which is exactly what the Buddha said after his enlightenment.
Excuse me?
He says, the Buddha's first...
Yeah, I've seen the house builder and he's not going to build a house again.
Oh, yes. I see.
And that connects with the image he has of little children making little mud houses. He said in the same way that we create our sense of who we are as a being out of the five aggregates. But then when we realize, okay, there's really nothing there that's worth... You can't make anything permanent, you can't make anything of real value out of these aggregates because they're so ephemeral. He says that's when the children destroy the houses.
Seems like so far away, but somehow we'll get there.
Yeah, well, somehow, yeah. There's a Dhamma talk, I've forgotten whether it's in Meditations 9 or 10, but it's called Anybody Home? Anybody Home? ? So search for that online. Okay, well, I thank you for your attention. Hope this has been helpful.